Welcome back to Forgotten Ties. Tonight, we delve into a story so unbelievable, so filled with twists of fate, it feels less like a documentary and more like a whispered secret passed down through generations. A story of a woman who, in the quiet solitude of a small town, found a clue that would shatter her understanding of family, identity, and the very fabric of her life. Her name is Sarah Jensen. On the surface, Sarah was the epitome of suburban contentment. A loving wife, a dedicated school librarian, a woman whose life seemed to follow a perfectly predictable, peaceful rhythm. But beneath that calm exterior, a secret lay buried, not a secret she knew, but one her life was built upon. Sarah was an only child, or so she had been told. Raised by loving, albeit reserved, parents in a quaint Victorian home, she never had reason to question her origins. Her childhood was a series of sun-drenched summers and cozy winter nights, a picture-perfect existence. But a few months ago, a series of seemingly insignificant events began to unfold, each one a tiny crack in the perfectly constructed facade of her life. It began with the old shed behind her house, a place her parents had always kept locked. When they passed away, Sarah inherited the home, and with it, the shed's rusted key. A morbid curiosity led her to finally open the door. Inside, amidst dusty tools and forgotten lawn equipment, she found an old, worn military chest. It wasn't a family heirloom she recognized. As she lifted the lid, a strange, metallic glint caught her eye. Buried beneath old uniforms and fading photographs was a single, tarnished dog tag. This wasn't just a piece of metal, it was a relic of a life she didn't know. The name etched on it wasn't her father's. It was a name that would echo through the rest of her story, a name that would lead her down a path of emotional turmoil and shocking revelations. The name was John Harrison. The birth date, the military serial number, all pointed to a person she couldn't place. The dog tag felt heavy in her hand, not just in weight, but with the burden of an unknown history. Sarah's calm, orderly world began to spin. Was this a long-lost relative? A secret from her father's past? The more she tried to make sense of it, the more questions arose, each one more unsettling than the last. She tried to dismiss it, to tell herself it was just a strange find, a relic from a past tenant. But the name, John Harrison, burrowed into her mind, a persistent whisper that demanded attention. She found herself obsessively researching the name, the birth date, the serial number. The internet, a vast ocean of information, offered tantalizing, yet frustratingly vague, glimpses. She found military records for a John Harrison, a soldier who had served in Vietnam. The dates matched. But there was no family tree, no clear connection. It was a dead end, or so it seemed. But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that this was not a coincidence. This was a breadcrumb, a trail left behind for her to find. The universe, in its own cruel and poetic way, was calling her to a destiny she never knew was hers. The name, John Harrison, became an obsession. Sarah's peaceful life was now punctuated by late nights hunched over her laptop, searching through digitized archives and grainy old newspapers. Her husband, Mark, noticed her growing preoccupation. He was a kind man, but he couldn't understand the depth of her fixation. He saw a rusty piece of metal. Sarah saw a ghost, a lost soul reaching out to her from beyond the grave. The more she dug, the more the pieces of a horrifying puzzle began to emerge. The military records led her to a small, forgotten news article from 1972, a brief, impersonal report on a soldier who had been killed in action. The name was John Harrison. But the article mentioned something else, a detail that made Sarah's blood run cold. It mentioned his surviving family, a wife and a young daughter named Sarah. The name on the article was her own, but the last name was different. Sarah Harrison. A wave of nausea washed over her. Could it be a bizarre coincidence? A common name? She desperately wanted to believe that, but the dog tag, the military records, and now this article were too specific, too intertwined to be a fluke. Her research led her to a small town in rural Kentucky, a place her parents had never mentioned. She found a grainy black and white photo of a young soldier, his face kind and earnest, a striking resemblance to a younger version of her father. But the name beneath the photo was John Harrison. In another photo, he stood with a beautiful young woman, her smile radiant. She was holding a baby. The baby was a girl. And something in the baby's eyes, a small, distinctive curve in the iris, was a mirror image of her own. The reality of the situation was beginning to set in, a painful, agonizing truth. The life she knew was a lie. Her parents, the people she loved and trusted, had not been her biological parents. They had taken her, adopted her, and kept a lifelong secret. The joy of her childhood was now tainted with a bitter sadness, a feeling of betrayal that cut deeper than any physical wound. She was an orphan, not by death, but by a deliberate act of concealment. The question that now consumed her was, why? Why had they done this? What had happened to her biological mother? The revelation of her adoption ignited a fire within Sarah, a burning need to know the truth. She found herself on a plane to Kentucky, the dog tag a cold weight in her pocket. The town was small, frozen in time. She visited the local library, a place that felt like a sanctuary, and delved into old town records. She found her birth certificate, a document that bore the name Sarah Harrison. The date of birth matched hers. Her biological mother's name was Amelia Harrison. The records showed that Amelia had died a few weeks after John was killed in action, a death attributed to a broken heart and a frail constitution. It was a tragic, heartbreaking story. But one detail was missing. The birth certificate listed a brother, born just 2 years after her, a brother she never knew existed. The record simply stated, unnamed male infant. The last name was Harrison. The puzzle was almost complete, but one piece was still missing, her brother. The idea that she had a brother out there, a blood relative who might be just as lost and alone as she felt, was a powerful motivator. She decided to visit the local cemetery, the final resting place of her biological parents. It was a quiet, overgrown place, filled with old tombstones and forgotten stories. She found their graves, a simple stone with 2 names, John Harrison and Amelia Harrison. She stood there for a long time, the weight of 50 years of secrets pressing down on her. As she turned to leave, something caught her eye. A small, new tombstone, tucked away behind a large oak tree. It was a child's grave, and the name was not a Harrison. It was Daniel Jensen. The birth date was just 2 months after her own. And the death date was the same as her parents' last name. A flash of insight hit her, a horrifying, gut-wrenching realization. The people she had known as her parents, the Jensens, had lost their own child, a boy named Daniel. In their grief, they had found her an orphan and had taken her in, raising her as their own. The love they had shown her was real, but it was born from a place of profound loss and a desire to fill a void. She wasn't just adopted, she was a replacement, a substitute for a son they had lost. But what about her real brother? The unnamed infant? Where was he? Back at her home, Sarah felt an overwhelming sense of peace mixed with sorrow. The lies were gone, replaced by a painful but liberating truth. She was Sarah Harrison, and she had a brother somewhere. With renewed determination, she went back to her online research, now with a new lead, the surname Jensen. She looked for any records of a child named Harrison who was adopted by a Jensen family in the same time frame. The search was a long shot, a desperate gamble, but she had to try. And then, she found it. A digitized adoption record from a small agency in Kentucky. It was sealed, but a recent court ruling had made some of the older, non-identifying information public. A note in the margin of the document mentioned a male infant, born to Amelia Harrison, who was adopted by a family named Jensen. The agency had placed the boy in a different state, and his name was changed. The paper trail ended there, a heartbreaking dead end. She was so close, yet so far. But fate, it seemed, had one final twist. Sarah had a long-standing tradition of volunteering at a local animal shelter. One day, a new volunteer, a man with a kind smile and a quiet demeanor, was working alongside her. They talked for hours, sharing stories about their lives, their families. His name was David Jensen. He told her he was adopted, that his birth parents had passed away when he was an infant. His adoptive parents, the Jensens, had lost their own child, a son, before they adopted him. A son named Daniel. The coincidences were staggering. He showed her a photo of his adoptive parents, and a gasp escaped Sarah's lips. It was a photo of her parents, the Jensens. David and Sarah were standing in front of the same old Victorian home. The same home she had inherited, the same home where she had found the dog tag. They had been raised by the same people, lived in the same house, but they had never known each other. David's story was eerily similar to her own. His adoptive parents had never told him he was adopted. The revelation came from an old box of his adoptive father's belongings, a box filled with old uniforms and fading photographs. The same chest, the same old uniforms. But instead of a dog tag, he found a sealed envelope addressed to him, a letter from his adoptive mother, a confession. A confession that revealed he was not their son. But it didn't reveal his real identity, just the truth of his adoption. In the box, there was a worn, faded photograph of a woman with a baby, a photograph Sarah had seen online. The woman was Amelia Harrison. And the baby was a boy. He was her brother. The dog tag, a relic of their shared father, a man they never knew, had brought them together. A small piece of metal, a symbol of a life lost, became the bridge to a family they never knew they had. They were finally home, not in a house, but in each other. If you were captivated by this story, if it resonated with you in any way, please do us a favor. Hit that like button to let us know you want more stories like this. Subscribe to Forgotten Ties so you don't miss a single episode, and be sure to turn on your notification bell so you're the first to know when we post a new video. Until next time, stay curious and remember, some of the greatest secrets are hidden in plain sight.